Ever get that feeling where you just want to really grasp something important, get to the core of it all without having to spend hours and hours just reading through tons of articles and doing all that research? Well, that's what we're all about here on the Deep Dive.
Your shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut to being seriously well-informed. And today, we're tackling something that's really at the heart of the tech world. Developer productivity.
Yeah, and we're not just going to skim the surface here with some, vague notions. We're diving deep today into a really fascinating framework called SPACE.
Ooh, space.
Yeah, and this isn't just some, pie-in-the-sky idea someone came up with on their own. This is the result of a super powerful collaboration. We're talking GitHub, the University of Victoria, and Microsoft.
Wow.
So, right from the start, this is something worth paying attention to.
Absolutely. So our mission in this deep dive is to really break down this space framework, make it super clear and understandable for you, so you can see that there's a much smarter, and a kind of a deeper way to think about developer productivity than just, counting how many lines of code someone writes.
Absolutely. It's a whole different way of looking at things.
It is.
And by the time we're done, you'll not only know the 5 key dimensions of the space framework, but you'll also get why each one is so critical for building a really thriving and effective development environment. One that actually works.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What is the space framework? What's it all about? It sounds kind of like a different way of looking at things.
It is, yeah. At its core, you can think of space as like a multidimensional lens that you use to view developer productivity. Instead of getting stuck on just 1 or 2 simple metrics, those things that are easy to measure, it recognizes that productivity is much more complex. It's more like a tapestry with all these interconnected threads. And it really pushes us to think about the human side of development just as much as we think about the technical output.
So it's not just about how much code someone writes.
Not at all. That's
No.
the big shift here. The framework actually lays out 5 essential dimensions, and all of these together, they really define overall developer productivity. These are satisfaction, performance, activity, communication, and efficiency.
That spells out space.
Exactly. Space.
Okay, easy to remember.
There you go.
So let's break down each of these dimensions one by one, and we'll start with satisfaction and well-being. What does that even mean in this context?
This dimension, it's all about the human element. How content are the developers? How healthy are they in their work? The idea is that when developers are happy and well-supported, they're going to be much more productive over the long haul. Think of it like any other field. If someone's miserable or burned out, their work's going to suffer.
Makes sense. We all know that feeling when you're just dragging yourself through the day and nothing gets done.
Yeah.
But how do you even begin to measure something as, kind of fuzzy as satisfaction?
Yeah, it's tough, but there are some indicators. The framework suggests looking at things like employee satisfaction surveys. You just ask developers directly about their experiences, their sense of fulfillment, how they feel about the work environment. You could also look at burnout rates within teams or even look for signs of a poor work-life balance. Are people constantly working late? Are they afraid to take time off? These can be really important signals. And for you, the listener, think about how your own well-being impacts your focus and how well you do your work no matter what your job is.
Right, it's a universal thing for sure. Feeling overwhelmed or unsupported definitely gets in the way of doing good work in any field. Okay, so we've covered satisfaction. Let's move on to the next dimension. Performance. Now, this sounds a little more like what people traditionally think of when they hear developer productivity.
You'd think so, yeah. But even here, the space framework has a more refined view of what performance really means. It's not just about how much work gets done. It's about the outcomes of that work. So what tangible results were achieved and what impact did they have? There's some really cool research on teams using the space framework that shows when they focus on impact instead of just output, they often end up proactively identifying and solving much bigger problems, even if it means fewer features get shipped out in the short term.
So it's not about churning out a ton of features. It's about whether those features are actually being used and solving real problems for users.
Exactly. Metrics in this dimension could be things like, how many bug reports are there? Is the code high quality and stable? Are people actually adopting and using the features that were built? And even you could look at the impact of the software on the entire organization. Did this project actually help achieve the business goals that it was supposed to? This is where it gets really interesting because it shifts the focus away from just writing code and towards delivering real value.
That's a real aha moment. Productivity isn't just about how much you do. It's about the impact of what you do. Okay, let's move on to the third dimension, activity. This sounds like it might be getting back to those more traditional metrics that we were just talking about moving away from.
You got it. Activity is all about tracking the sheer volume of work that's being done.
Yeah.
So think about things like the number of code commits, how many code reviews is a developer participating in, or the total number of pull requests that they merged.
So this is where you could theoretically count lines of code?
You could, but the framework really cautions against relying too much on these kinds of metrics by themselves. High activity doesn't always mean high performance or even high satisfaction. Someone could be making a lot of small, insignificant changes, for example. This dimension is more about getting a sense of the overall level of effort and flow, but it really needs to be looked at alongside the other dimensions to get the full picture. It's like if you just tracked how many emails you sent in a day, a high number doesn't necessarily mean you were actually effective or productive.
Right. Quantity versus quality. Just being busy doesn't mean you're actually getting things done. Okay, the fourth dimension is communication and collaboration. This seems especially important in software development, which is all about teamwork.
Absolutely. It's almost never a solo effort. This dimension looks at how well developers communicate and collaborate with each other. How's the teamwork? So metrics here could include things like how often are teams meeting, and are those meetings actually productive, or are they just wasting time? How clear and efficient are the communication channels? Can people easily find the information they need? Can they get their questions answered quickly? And then there are the collaboration tools themselves, everything from shared documents to the systems they use for code review. How effective are those?
I can only imagine how much havoc poor communication can wreak on a project. Misunderstandings, duplicated effort, people working in silos, it all adds up to a lot of wasted time and energy.
Exactly. Good communication and smooth collaboration can prevent all of that. It streamlines the workflow and it can really boost productivity. When teams work together effectively, when they solve problems efficiently, and they're open about sharing knowledge, the impact is huge. Think about it in your own work. How much smoother are things when everyone's on the same page and communication is open?
Well, it makes a world of difference. All right, and last but not least, we have the fifth dimension, efficiency and flow. This sounds like it's all about removing obstacles and letting developers really get into that zone where they can focus deeply.
That's it, exactly. This dimension is about evaluating how smoothly the development process runs and how often developers can get into that state of uninterrupted concentration. What some people call flow. Metrics here might include things like cycle times. How long does it take for a code change to go from that initial commit to actually being deployed and live? Or time to merge code changes. Are there bottlenecks in the code review process that are holding things up? And you can even try to measure how much focused development time each person is actually getting without interruptions. Tools like code review analytics platforms can provide really useful data on time to merge, which can highlight potential bottlenecks in the CI/CD pipeline. That's a common frustration for dev teams that are trying to improve their flow. Ah, yes, the mythical uninterrupted coding session. I bet every developer listening knows exactly how frustrating it is to constantly be pulled in different directions and then try to get back on track.
For sure. And when developers can consistently get into that flow state, that's when they're typically at their most creative and productive. So looking at efficiency and flow helps identify those friction points and areas where you can optimize the process and minimize distractions.
So we've covered all five: satisfaction, performance, activity, communication, and efficiency. Space. Why are these space metrics so important? Why should organizations even bother with all of this? The real strength of the space framework is that it's so holistic, like we've been talking about. It goes way beyond just looking at one or two simple metrics, and it gives you a much richer and more nuanced understanding of what's actually happening within development teams. It shines a light on all these different interconnected aspects of productivity, so you're not just fixated on output. It also helps to create a better balance. You can see if pushing for more output is actually hurting developer well-being, which is not sustainable in the long run.
Right. You don't want to burn out your most valuable asset,
Yeah,
your developers.
exactly. And because you're getting these detailed insights across all these different dimensions, you're able to make much more strategic and targeted improvements. You can pinpoint the specific areas that need attention. Maybe it's investing in better communication tools, or maybe it's streamlining the code review process, or maybe it's addressing some underlying issues that are affecting morale and satisfaction. It all leads to data-informed decisions that are going to be much more effective and aligned with the organization's overall goals.
So it's not just about collecting data for the sake of having numbers. It's about using that data to actually make positive changes.
Exactly. You get a more complete and accurate picture, which then leads to better strategies for creating a sustainably productive development environment.
So let's say an organization is on board. They see the value in this space framework. How do they actually implement these metrics? What are the steps involved?
The first thing you got to do is establish baselines. You need to understand where you are right now across all 5 of the space dimensions. So you gather some initial data, and that becomes your benchmark. That's what you'll use to measure future progress and see the impact of any changes you make.
It's like taking a snapshot of the current situation before you start making changes.
Exactly. Once you have those baselines, the next step is to integrate the tools you need for data collection. Luckily, a lot of the tools that development teams are already using can give you valuable data that's relevant to space metrics. This could be things like version control systems, project management platforms, code review tools, communication platforms, and even employee feedback systems. It's about figuring out what data you already have access to and what new data you might need to start tracking.
So leverage what you're already using as much as possible.
Mhm.
Makes sense. So you're collecting all this data. What happens next?
Then comes the really important part: regular review and analysis. Just collecting data isn't enough. You actually have to look at it to spot trends and understand what the numbers are telling you about your teams and your processes. Data visualization tools can be super helpful here. They make the data easier to understand and you can share it with more people. Are satisfaction scores dipping after a really demanding project? Is the average time it takes to merge code steadily increasing? These are the kinds of questions you'll be looking to answer.
So looking for patterns, identifying potential bottlenecks, seeing if things are getting better or worse.
Right. And once you've gleaned those insights from the data, then you can start implementing targeted improvements. This is where you take action based on what the data is telling you. For example, if communication seems to be a major bottleneck, maybe you invest in better collaboration platforms or rethink how team meetings are structured and run. If developer well-being is a concern, you might look at things like workload distribution, project timelines, even company policies around working hours and vacation time.
So it's a very data-driven approach to making changes.
Absolutely. And the last step, and this is really key for long-term success, you have to continuously iterate and optimize. Improving developer productivity isn't a one-time fix. It's an ongoing process of refinement. You need to regularly check your metrics, see if the changes you've made are having the desired effect, and be willing to adjust your strategies and approaches as needed. It's all about fostering a culture of continuous improvement.
It sounds like a very practical and flexible framework.
That's exactly what it's designed to be. It gives you a structured but adaptable way to approach this complex and ever-changing challenge.
Okay, so let's wrap it all up.
Mm.
What are the key takeaways here? What's the big picture for organizations?
The space framework offers a much more sophisticated and comprehensive way to understand developer productivity. By looking at these 5 interconnected dimensions, organizations can move beyond those simplistic and often misleading metrics. They can gain deeper, more actionable insights into how their development teams actually function and what truly drives their efficiency, effectiveness, and overall well-being.
And those deeper insights lead to some pretty big advantages for the organization as a whole, right?
Definitely. You can implement much more effective strategies which lead to higher quality software, a more engaged and motivated development team, and ultimately better business outcomes. It's about creating this positive feedback loop where developers are happy and well supported so they can do their best work, which leads to better products and a more successful organization.
So the space framework gives organizations a balanced and comprehensive way to really understand and improve developer productivity by thoughtfully considering these 5 interconnected dimensions: satisfaction, performance activity communication, and efficiency.
Exactly. It's about looking at the complete picture and recognizing that developer productivity is a multifaceted and fundamentally human endeavor.
This has been a really insightful deep dive into the space framework. It definitely gives you, the listener, a lot to think about in terms of how we define and measure productivity, especially in today's complex and collaborative development environments.
And it raises a really interesting question. Think about how these core principles of looking at multiple interconnected facets of productivity and well-being could apply to your work or field. It doesn't matter if you're a software developer or not. How could you gain a more holistic and insightful understanding of success that goes beyond just immediate outputs or those easily quantifiable metrics? What are some of the less traditional indicators that could provide valuable insights into your own effectiveness and the overall health of your team or your projects?
That's a great question to ponder. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope it's given you a valuable shortcut to understanding the power and potential of the space framework.